Hello again. We have now reached to the final of this conference, and what we are having now is the plenary session, and we will have presentations from the different workshops. And Kate Sanderson, she will present on the marine environment and sustainable resource management. Jens Christian Justinsen will present on the sustainable industry in relation to market image and investments. And Signar Heinesen will present on innovation in energy and technology off and onshore. And in the end, we will hear Ola Gregersen on Transatlantic Climate Institute as a knowledge hub. And after these four introductions by these four people, we will have a plenary discussion where all the audience will have the opportunity to come forward with questions or opinions before we will conclude the day at 16:45. And the first speaker will be Kate Sanderson. Kate Sanderson, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Magni. As Magni said, our workshop this morning was entitled The Marine Environment and Sustainable Resource Utilisation. We had 6 presentations from around the region, including the Faroes, Norway, Greenland, and from Scotland. We had quite a diversity and range of information presented this morning. I won't presume to summarise each presentation, but I have tried to pull out some of the common threads in the information, some of the main conclusions drawn, as well as some of the main points and questions raised in the general discussion. The general characteristics of the marine environment and ecological relationships in the North Atlantic seem to be generally well understood, with relative low species diversity, cool seas, traditionally top-down patterns of fishing, that is targeting the larger predators first, and a good understanding of the ocean current systems that characterise the region. The relationship between cod and shrimp in the northwest Atlantic was highlighted in a couple of the presentations, with the shrimp having taken over the niche formerly occupied by cod in the region, and the dominance of shrimp perhaps also being a factor in preventing the re-establishment of commercially viable cod stocks that were previously known. Industry and regulators have learnt to adapt to these regime shifts. One obvious example being the adaptation to and development of successful shrimp and lobster fisheries in the northwest Atlantic today. However, increases in sea temperatures caused by climate change may create a much larger degree of uncertainty about the way the North Atlantic ecosystems and trophic relationships will behave in the future. This increased uncertainty will therefore require the application of greater precaution in fisheries management. There are indications that warmer sea temperatures are leading to a northerly migration of several key fish species and have significance for the species composition and growth rates in certain regions, such as on the Faroe Bank. In Greenland, there are trends indicating that the cod is making a comeback, but that the shrimp may be decreasing. It was stressed that the relationship is not a simple one. The increase in cod around Greenland has not been as great as expected, and future management will require much care and patience. The relationship between the subpolar gyre and the distribution of the blue whiting stock is an example where bottom-up effects and the relationship between ocean currents and primary production are equally significant factors as the top-down aspects of fisheries, which also need to be taken into account in management. On the broader management and policy side, we heard some very clear and frank views from Scotland on the EU Common Fisheries Policy. Alan Smith, the MEP for Scotland, was in no doubt that European Union's common fisheries policy has been an abject failure. He also highlighted the need within the EU for better cross-sectoral coordination on marine and climate issues. Scotland's experience in implementing fisheries management measures on a national level without waiting for the blessings of Brussels was seen as an indication that it is actually possible to change the EU fisheries management system from within. But the EU would benefit greatly from a more active information exchange with other non-EU fisheries nations in the North Atlantic. This was an issue which the Scottish Government plans to pursue more actively in the near future, also through their newly established Sustainable Seas Task Force. So in general there, I think there was a great deal of interest from the Scottish side in engaging North Atlantic partners on these issues. In the general discussion, I just wanted to bring up some of the questions, issues raised very briefly. It was noted that it was important to define management objectives and to do management on the right scale. And in that light, it was seen that perhaps the Faroes could be a good case study in this regard. The alternative would be putting the burden of proof on fishermen. A point was raised that there's a need to reduce fishing effort, perhaps including the number of vessels, this in order to enhance sustainability of resource use, which would also lead to a reduction in CO2 emissions, and this would seem to be an obvious way forward. Another suggestion was that perhaps the focus should be on stopping trawling and focusing more on passive gear methods in fisheries, also from a climate emissions point of view. Finally, the point about global food security was raised. It was noted that if you compare the total emissions production that comes out of fisheries compared with livestock production, fisheries comes out much more favourably in this respect in relation to how much CO2 is discharged in order to provide food and protein. For geopolitical reasons, this may lead to an even greater increase in pressure on using fish stocks in the future. So this would be an important challenge to take into consideration. Finally, I'd just like to mention some of the issues raised during our workshop that have perhaps relevance for future research and development collaboration, and which may be areas for Tacit to take on board in its future planning. The future benefits of greater collaboration between science and industry to reduce CO2 emissions while increasing fishing efficiency was highlighted. Based on the relationship between blue whiting distribution and oceanographic conditions, it was suggested that vessel operators could use oceanographic information to identify the most productive areas in the region, thereby saving vessels a lot of fuel that they would otherwise be using to search for fishable areas. In addition, technology is being developed that can in the future provide us with ocean weather forecasts, mapping and forecasting conditions in the sea that can be used to optimise fisheries. Plans are underway in Greenland to establish a climate research institute to examine the full range of issues related to the impacts of climate change on the natural environment, economy and society of Greenland. It was highlighted that this institute would be an obvious partner in the initiative to develop a transatlantic climate institute. Transatlantic cooperation on genetic analyses of cod stocks already exists, in particular looking at the varying capacities of cod stocks in the region to adapt to different environmental conditions. And this research has the potential for further development. Likewise, there is potential for further enhancing existing transatlantic cooperation on engineering better technologies for offshore aquaculture facilities, which can be adapted to changing conditions at sea and maximise the use of the best conditions for optimum production. That was my summary. Thank you.